What's up, guys? It's Juan here. We're going to do something a little bit different. I am going to do a reaction video. Now, I've done these kinds of things before. I did it with the Super Bowl. Me and my sister did it with Beyonce's halftime performance in Houston. So we've done it a couple times. It's not typically what we do on this channel, but I wanted to go ahead and give it a try because this video popped up on my YouTube recommended page, and I said, you know what? Let's see how much I know about immigration law, which, as a Mexican American, as a dual citizen, you know, let's see where I fare in these kinds of conversations. And also with the political climate at large, I'm willing to bet there are 95% of Americans out there that don't know a lot about immigration. So let's see what we can learn together, right?
I'm Charles Cook, law professor and immigration lawyer. I'm here today to answer your questions from the internet. This is Immigration Support.
Shout out to Wired for putting all this stuff together. I watch these all the time. I'll be watching all the support videos that they bring. They're actually super fun.
This is a question from Zambala HODL. Okay, I realize I don't understand the difference between a visa, a green card, a refugee, or an asylum seeker.
Ooh,
a visa.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Okay, let me see if I can answer it and then we'll play it. A visa is something that gets stamped on your passport whenever you enter the country, right? So you can get a tourist visa. There's also so many different kinds of visas. You can get a worker's visa. You can also get a student visa. You can get I'm not sure how many kinds of visas there are, but I'm sure there are very specific ones when it comes to the kind of worker that you are, where you come from, what kind of student you are. But it's essentially a visa is a permission slip. You are allowed to be here under these conditions or under these requirements, under these prerequisites or something like that. A green card is it's just an ID that is green, and it pretty much shows you, it pretty much legitimizes the status of your lawfulness in this country. So you can be a permanent resident, or you can be a conditional resident, right? And so it'll show you that, right? So a visa holder probably won't have a social security number, and they won't have, they won't be able to get a driver's license, maybe, or maybe yes, depending on the worker. See, this is where it gets a little fuzzy. But they definitely can't, it comes with a certain condition. I'm sure they can work, because they can get a tax ID number probably if they have a worker's visa specifically. But a resident shows that you are, a green card shows that you're a resident or not, a conditional resident, a permanent resident. And it pretty much legitimizes you as a part of this country. You're not yet a citizen, but you're a permanent resident, which means you have pretty much all the rights of this country with the exception of voting. And then what was the other one? A refugee. A refugee is somebody that comes from another country escaping political violence and or catastrophe. And the country will accept you into this country as a refugee status, which is slightly different than asylum. An asylum seeker is somebody that shows up at the border and declares that they're seeking asylum because they're probably fleeing political prosecution, or, it can probably be political opinions or a genocide or something like that, but you have to show up first. You can't claim asylum from the country that you're trying to escape. You have to be at the border and say, I'm here and I'm seeking asylum. And then I'm sure that's a lengthy ass process, months and shit, of trying to figure out how to handle you, which coincidentally is part of the reason why a couple years back, whenever they were doing the migrant caravan, right? It happened during Trump's first term or the second term or whatever it was. There's always this thing the caravan was coming, the caravan was coming. And what that meant is that presumably all these immigrants were going to show up at the border, declare asylum, and that we were going to have to figure out or adjudicate. We were going to have to adjudicate. We were going to have to adjudicate whether they are actual asylum seekers or whether they're just trying to come into the country and stay here, right? The hard part about that is that our immigration system, as it stands, does not have the manpower to be able to adjudicate those things in real time very quickly. So a lot of these people were going to be allowed to stay and wait for their day in court to figure out if they were actual asylum seekers or not. But we're so backdated. Plus COVID really did a number on the country's infrastructure when it comes to USCIS probably, and ICE, and all that shit. So yeah, those are probably like the main differences. There might be some nuances there that maybe I'm missing, but I think I got them. It gets real complicated on the back end of like figuring out the whole asylum thing, and presidents will use this as an excuse, say like, oh, we're backed up at the border, we can't send everybody back. But the reality of it is that Congress is what is the entity in our country that allocates money. So if Border Patrol doesn't have enough funds or doesn't have enough money, it's because Congress hasn't allocated them. The president has very little to do with how much money gets appropriated for Congress, how much of our tax dollars gets appropriated for Border Patrol and the border in general. So anyway, yeah, let's see. Let's see if we get it right.
Stamp that a consular officer
let's go back a little bit.
I don't understand the difference between a visa, a green card, a refugee, or an asylum seeker. A visa is actually a stamp that a consular officer at a U.S. consulate puts in a foreign national's passport to allow them to come to the United States and apply for entry at the airport or at a border. For a visa, there's many different bases. For example, you can get a visa to visit the United States. You can get a work visa. Overall, there's 24 different types of visas
24?
to come here temporarily, as well as an additional 30 immigrant visas to immigrate to the United States.
See, this is what I'm saying. I didn't know there were that many kinds of visas. That's kind of crazy. That's why it's important, if you have a visa, for you to talk to an immigration lawyer if your visa is about to expire and not. Because if you click or you check the wrong thing on the box or on the paperwork or the renewal process or whatever, and you click the wrong thing, Dunskies, bro. Dunskies. And you don't even know what you got wrong. They won't even tell you.
A green card is actually evidence of somebody's permanent residence in the United States.
Boom.
They call it a green card because it's green. Kind of looks like a driver's license. A refugee is an individual who is outside the United States, who goes through about a 2-year vetting process and ultimately can become a permanent resident. That refugee has to show that they've been persecuted in some way abroad. An asylum seeker, on the other hand, is someone who is in the United States either with or without a visa, or who comes to the border and asks to apply for asylum. They have to show to an immigration judge or the immigration officials that they have a fear of persecution in their home country because of their race, their religion, their nationality, their political opinion, or because they are a member of a social group. For example, because they're gay or they're lesbian. This question is from Cool Dude 01.
I didn't know that it was because you belong to a specific social group. That's interesting. But I guess it makes sense, because if you come from, like, if you're trying to get here and you're seeking asylum from, say, like an authoritarian regime, and they're like, persecuting gays or, people that are gay or lesbian, I can see why that would be enough based on that. So I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense.
0. How hard is it to legally immigrate to the United States from the Mexican border if you are not a citizen?
It's really hard. If you are not a citizen and you want to come here legally from Mexico, you have to go through a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy in Mexico, and then you also have to request from the United States to try to be here, and they have to approve it, and then you have to go through all of that. Sometimes it could take years. If you show up at the border and you are not you don't have a visa, and you don't seek asylum, and you want to stay, it's pretty much impossible.
Basically impossible. If you just show up at the border, you have no legal right to remain in the United States, nor do you have a legal right to immigrate to the United States unless you're applying for asylum. And even then, you're likely to be detained. And at that point, you will have to show an immigration judge that you have this fear of persecution of returning to your home country. These types of decisions usually take months, if not a couple of years, to adjudicate, during which time you might be detained.
Let's
Jay
go.
Sanchez 030. Why are Americans who live overseas called expats, but everyone else who does the same is called an immigrant? Expats is simply a term used by corporate America as they send U.S. workers abroad for temporary assignments. Generally,
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know what an expat is.
Speaking, if somebody stays in that country, they become immigrants to that country. There are people on expat contracts to the United States. You just never hear about that. This question from Raw21 Red. In this day and age, can you still marry someone for a green card?
Sure. Yes, you can marry somebody for a green card, although it's pretty difficult and they go through a lot of vetting to try to make sure that your marriage isn't fraudulent.
I tell individuals when they come to meet with me, you have to fall in love first. It's not just, hey, I'm going to go find somebody to get married. That's called marriage fraud, and that is quite illegal in the United States. So the U.S. Immigration Service pays a lot of attention to marriage cases, especially when the couple looks like they don't really belong together. Somebody marries someone from another country and they don't speak each other's languages. At that point, the Immigration Service may...
That's crazy. I would love to think that the people that are getting married for green cards have a little bit more sense than to marry somebody that they can't communicate with. Because if there was ever a red flag for a government official, it's that. It's probably that. That's the equivalent of like getting pulled over saying you're not smoking weed, but like the smoke is like came out of your window as you rolled the window down.
Questions about whether this is a real marriage. Generally speaking, when you marry a U.S. citizen and you are approved for a green card or permanent residence, you're only approved for 2 years. And
that's kind of what I meant earlier whenever I was talking about the green card, like conditional residency, right? Those 2 years are conditional, and then you have to like go back and figure out whether you can get your conditions removed.
End of those 2 years, you have to go back to the Immigration Service and prove that you physically live together. Immigration requires, generally speaking, commingling of assets, shared bank account statements, for example, living in the same location with a lease in both your names.
That's crazy. That's crazy in and of itself, because like if you were married to somebody, say you're both citizens, right? Say like you and your partner are both citizens and you guys are married. Like, it would make complete sense for you guys not to want to have a joint bank account. Like, let's say the woman makes her own money and has her own job and was doing well, and the guy has his own money, has his own job, and is doing well. Like, if they chose not to have a co-account and like commingle anything and everything was completely separate, like it doesn't delegitimize your marriage or your love for each other or anything like that. But it's crazy how in this kind of situation, that's the kind of thing that a government official that can't like gauge whether you two are in love or not, like the nooks and crannies of your intimate relationship, they'll base it off of like these really outdated ways of proving that like, oh, they must love each other, their bank account is joint, even though y'all got like $3 in there.
Has an entire task force of men and women who go out and check whether this documentation is real. And I will tell you, they do find people who try to scam this system. Do some people get away with it? Absolutely. Do most people get away with it? Absolutely not. I love this question from Dirk Losman. Where do Americans immigrate to? Did you know that?
Americans immigrate everywhere. Everywhere. Over the past couple of years, I've known about quite a few Americans that have moved to other countries. But it's just as hard to immigrate to another country as it is here. People think that just because you're American that you're going to be able to just like migrate to another country and the country will let you. Like, it's still kind of hard. Like, you still need to prove that you are a valued member of society in the sense that you'll be able to provide value to that country in some way, shape, or form, usually with a job. You can't just like show up and then be like, whatever. There was a lot of people during COVID that like moved, like that were in the same time zone that like worked remote, right? Like I had a friend that worked in New York and was making like a pretty cozy salary, and like they just stayed in the same time zone and then like didn't renew their lease, moved to some island, like off the coast of, I don't know, like Miami or I don't know, like some island somewhere in the Caribbean, and they were able to like work there under the same schedule and they were living like kings because they were still earning a New York salary, and they were living somewhere where like $5 can go a long, long, long way, and they just like flew back for meetings and stuff. And then there was like the recent controversy currently in Mexico that there's a lot of Americans that are like moving to Mexico, and it's like a tug of war between like maybe you're boosting the Mexican economy, but then you're also making it like really hard for Mexicans that live there to be able to afford some of the things that you want, or everything else gets a little bit more expensive. So like the small business owner or the business owner loves it, but then also like the people that are around it don't want to be there, and then they have like a sour taste in their mouth because of all these foreigners. So like kind of the same, the same sentiment that you hear a lot of Americans talk about. But there's a lot of people that like move to like Mexico City. A lot of people move to Mexico City, Guadalajara. Yeah, it's like pretty popular.
Today, there are over 1 million Americans living in Mexico. It's the highest source country for receiving
That's fucking
Americans.
crazy. 1 million?
You can go anywhere in the world, and you will find a, quote, expat community. There's been a large increase in the number of Americans leaving the country since Donald Trump became president the second time. A lot of other countries are welcoming Americans, generally because Americans have money. Americans create jobs.
But you got to have money, though. You gotta have money. That's the key thing. Like you gotta be able to like show up with some money, with the ability to like make stuff happen. I didn't know there was 1 million Americans in Mexico though. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy, bro.
Americans have experience that maybe their countries lack.